Hello, guys. So I was just talking earlier, and people were asking me why I was running in my midline a dual Metatron and how exactly that was being beneficial. So we were talking, and I realized that some people were having a little bit of an issue understanding how the line buffs worked. So I'm just going to make a 2-minute video on basically explaining how they work. So there's two types of buffs. There's a debuff and there's a buff. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Metatron has a line debuff, who's going to be called Mercy at Insanity, and there's going to be some line buffs who are going to be, for example, Duke's Low Key Trick 2. So the one thing you need to know about buffs is that a buff with the same name on the same line cannot stack. I'm thinking very specifically for the Wyrmwind players who have Murian and Linmei, who I think have the exact same name and skill. That skill that boosts their reflex will not stack. That's why as a Wyrmwind user, you're never going to put both of them in midline. Now, there are new types of buffs. So with the new unique stones, there are now buffs that are vertical. So it's the exact same idea. They will not stack, except they're going to be going in a vertical aspect. And the third type of buff you're going to have is going to be a team buff. So this buff is going to be usually on certain players. Most common one is Murian, because she can increase action speed and attack power, if I remember correctly, 15% with every movement. And there's a bunch of other ones who have skill like that. And there's debuffs, for example, Alice, that I desperately want. Now, a last thing is there are some buffs that are stackable. For example, there's going to be Milky Way stack, who's going to be called now Smile Sprinkler. So the thing is, accumulates up to 5 times for 6 minutes. If you're doing a game mode where you're allowed to borrow someone else's ace and they have a Milky Way, whenever one of the two of them does an action, the total stack will go up by 1. But the max of 3 will remain the same max. So even if there's a 6-minute, you have a higher chance of actually always being at the max stack, but you will never be able to go above it. So that's basically how the buffs work. The only exception to how buffs work is something more specific. This might be a little bit more endgame. It does require very certain players, and the one I'm going to think in particular is going to be our friend Jiho. There's certain ace effects that are called increased support passive skill effects. So support passives are going to be buffs to a line, to a team, or to anything that is not on an individual personal self. And this is going to buff all line effects by 5%. So this is one of the little tricks that you can actually find to buff your entire team if you're running a lot of line buffs or team buffs. The thing is, Jiho is a legendary, and the chances of you having him are extremely low. Now, of course, there's going to be, in his evolved version, it's higher. And when the E is going to come out, he's going to be completely broken. I know a bunch of very high advanced players are running him. I'm pretty sure in Coliseum of Despair, we can't really see this yet because the list isn't completely up to date because it just reset. But for example, Enox, who is usually in the top 5-6, is now running him as an ace. So I hope this helps people basically understand the tricks and the ideas behind line buffs. I made a few other videos explaining what you're supposed to look in each line. So reference to those who know what you're looking for, but this is just the base of how a line buff actually works. Have a good day, guys.